Hello and welcome to the fifth of our 6 rural crime webinars. My name is Caron Chester and I'm the Regional Services Manager at New South Wales Farmers for the Western Division. Rural crime affects nearly everyone and New South Wales farmers are excited to have this ongoing valuable relationship with the New South Wales Police Rural Crime Prevention Team and to bring you the 2020 Tackling Rural Crime webinar series. These informative, solutions-based sessions will help you to prevent rural crime on your property and in your community, and I'm sure you will find these webinars of value. Please do not hesitate to ask any questions in the questions tab throughout the webinar, and we will try to answer as many of them as we can. I would now like to welcome Detective Sergeant Ty Johnston, who tonight will deliver the webinar on crime scene evidence. Thank you, Ty.
G'day everyone, and welcome to the webinar this evening. Firstly, I just want to thank New South Wales Farmers for allowing us to work in conjunction with them to present these webinars to the rural community. I'd also like to welcome tonight Detective Sergeant Damien Knott. He's our Southern Zone Rural Crime Coordinator, who's here in support tonight, and also Detective Chief Inspector Cameron Whiteside. He's our State Rural Crime Coordinator who works out of Mudgee. So thank you for coming along, guys, and thank you for the support. Again, everyone, I'll just dig into this webinar. We'll probably, I suppose, go over some stuff if you've been in the last few webinars that you've already heard. But for those who are fresh to this particular webinar, probably I'll give you a bit of an overview as to what we do as the Rural Crime Prevention Team, where we sit in the New South Wales Police, and what we can do to help you. Again, just welcome and thank you everyone for participating in the webinar this evening. I appreciate the time that you've taken out of your busy schedules, which I know at this time of year is always quite busy in the rural community, given everything that's going on with harvest and the like. Again, I just want to thank New South Wales Farmers for organising the webinar and their ongoing commitment in building relationships that contribute to tackling rural crime in our communities. We acknowledge that things are tough on the land and hope that these webinars help with them in the knowledge of who the Rural Crime Prevention Team is and where we are located, and strategies to target harden your property and methods of reporting crime. During the webinar, just feel free to send any questions you have through to the moderator, who will wait until after this presentation to ask those questions to myself and my other two colleagues, who will be back to answer those questions at the end. So prior to the creation of the Rural Crime Prevention Team, there were 34 rural crime investigators and 1 rural crime intelligence analyst. In 2017, Commissioner Michael Fuller made a commitment to the people of regional New South Wales to address incidents of rural crime in our state. So what we'll show you here today is a bit of a slice of that commitment that Mr. Fuller has made to the New South Wales community. So as a result, we've been able to provide more specialised police resources, which have been deployed to regional locations around New South Wales, which include the additional rural crime investigators. Now, rural crime investigators are considered specialists in their fields of policing, and with this increase in numbers, it provides extra police on the ground to fight rural crime. Where we currently stand at the moment in the New South Wales Police, we have 52 members in our team. We've got a Detective Chief Inspector, which I've already mentioned previously. We've got 4 Detective Sergeants, who are known around the state as the Rural Crime Zone Coordinators. Now, they're positioned around the state specifically to provide an overview for all the other rural crime investigators who they assist. They're located at Parks, Moree, Cootamundra and Casino, which is where I'm located. So under those 4 rural crime zone coordinators, we have 43 rural crime investigators. Now, these are specialised detectives, and they're located at 26 non-metropolitan locations around regional and rural New South Wales. Further, we have 3 rural crime intelligence analysts who are civilians, which assist our rural crime investigators in relation to the work that they're currently doing. They're based with the sergeants, and they're currently based at Parks, Casino and Cootamundra. We also are lucky enough to have a rural crime policy and project officer who has been with us for a considerable amount of time, and they're located at Dubbo. So the rural crime prevention team has been basically created to increase our capability to support communities in the prevention, disruption and response to rural crime. The rural crime investigators are really subject matter experts in rural crime. For rural communities, they're an integral part of the New South Wales Police, and in particular, the challenge to meet the community and industry expectations in remote, rural and regional New South Wales. As you can see from the map here, our team members are located across New South Wales. Again, the teams are broken into 4 zones. You've got the Northwest Zone, which covers from Bourke across to the Inverell and Tamworth regions. You've got Central Zone, which covers the centre of New South Wales around Dubbo, Bathurst, Orange, and all the way out around Broken Hill and Darton. And then you've got the Southern Zone, which covers across to the East Coast, Southern East Coast, and the Southern districts along the Victorian border. And then you've got the Northern Zone where I'm located, which covers the East Coast from Tweed Heads all the way down to Muswellbrook. The detective sergeants coordinate all rural crime investigators within each zone in conjunction with the local police that currently work there. So in 2014, the New South Wales Police Force amended the definition of rural crime. The definition is incidents of crime that impact on the function of the pastoral, agricultural and aquaculture industries. So the key phrase that we look at there is basically crime that impacts on the function of those 3 areas of the rural industry. This definition does not include all crimes or incidents that are committed in rural locations. Predominantly those that impact on the function of the rural industries is what we look at. So this leads me into what do rural crime investigators do? A rural crime investigator is a criminal investigator who's a subject matter expert in rural crime. We're all detectives and we undergo the same training as all detectives in the New South Wales Police Force. Rural crime investigators provide expertise on rural crime issues to the police districts. It's important for everyone to know that all police can take a report and respond to rural crime. We must tell you that rural crime investigators do not investigate all crimes in rural areas. That would be impossible given the vast areas in which they've got to cover. All police in rural New South Wales are able to take the initial report and respond to rural crime. At the end of the day, rural crime is a crime. So today, my presentation stems around crime scene evidence on the properties when the crime has been committed. Firstly, I want to take you over what is an actual crime scene. Okay, a crime scene is any physical scene anywhere that may provide potential evidence to attending police and or investigators. So with that in mind, what type of crime scenes are there? There are 2 types that we look at. We've got a primary crime scene, which is where the actual offence took place. For example, the point of entry for a break and enter into a house. The primary crime scene there would be the point of entry for that. Then we look at what other type of crime scenes we have. We've got a secondary crime scene, which is a location that may contain evidence of the offence, but not the location where the offence took place. So for an example of that would be if they took a large quantity of property from your premises, put it in a vehicle, the police pulled the vehicle up, that vehicle would then be a secondary crime scene. So the type of areas where we look and locations where we encounter the crime scenes out in the rural areas. So we've got the premises, the sheds, which are either indoor or outdoor premises. We also look at vehicles. They're the three main areas where we're looking for the crime scenes when the offence has taken place. So what do we look for when we're at a crime scene? As investigators, as members of the public, we look for physical evidence. Now, physical evidence is any object or item that shows that a crime has been committed, or it establishes a link between a crime and a possible suspect and the victim. So what do we do when we come across a crime scene, or what are the processes that are undertaken when it involves a crime scene? So firstly, the initial stage is the incident of the crime is identified. Now that would be by the victim, by a witness, and the next stage is the preservation of that. That's the important part that I want to get across tonight. Once you've preserved it as best you can, and unfortunately you're not going to be able to do it right all the time, but I'm going to try and help you out with a couple of little hints tonight to get you across the line so we can get as much evidence as possible in proving this. The next part is reporting it to the police. Now there's two ways that we can report this to the police. We can do it via the police assistance line, or secondary, we can have the police attend the scene. Once the police attend the scene, we're able to have the investigations undertaken, which then may enable us to have specialist police attend, which could be the rural crime investigators, or it can be the forensic services group. Forensic services are the group of people who we rely upon in the New South Wales Police to come out and take evidence of the crime for forensic examination. So every crime scene is different. Every incident's going to be different. Not every single one's going to be the same. You're going to have different point of entries to where the crime's been committed. You're going to have different evidence left or different evidence taken. So what do we look at, or what do we consider when we're looking at a crime scene? Probably one of the most important direct forms of evidence that we look for is fingerprints and or DNA. That provides direct identification of a person who may have been at the premises, in particular around the points of entry. Now we look at that because with every crime scene, there's a certain amount of transference from the offender to the scene. And we try to obtain as much of that evidence as possible when we do examine it. We can obtain fingerprints and DNA from items such as items that they've moved, surfaces that they've touched, or documents that they've touched. Another form of evidence that we look for at crime scenes is impression evidence. This could be from their shoes, tyres from a vehicle that they've driven to your premises, or tool marks that they've used to break in or cut wire to get into your, whether it be your shed or through the gate or wherever they're on your property. Now, these are valuable forms of evidence and should be considered nearly at every crime scene examination. So the processes which we look at is detection, we enhance it, we record it, and then we compare it if we can. Other things that our crime scene and specialist forensic personnel do look at is physical comparison. This can include recovered stock in relation to stock theft matters. We look at brands and earmarks, and we have the ability to compare an image of one, whether it be a stolen cow with a certain earmark, to the pliers used by the farmer to mark his cattle. Now, these examinations can assist with identification to prove or disprove whether or not those cattle or livestock are theirs. So the forensic investigators will compare physical characteristics such as shape, colour, fit and size. A recent example of this is a livestock matter theft that I dealt with on the far north coast of New South Wales. We were able to use the brands after shaving the hair off the cow back to brands that we identified on stock, which were, that was the only form of identification. Another form of comparison is biomechanical measurements. As you're aware, and a lot of it's being used now, is CCTV cameras on farms. Forensic investigators are able to obtain biomechanical measurements from the suspects. They're able to utilise these reference points from the crime scene. The measurements will include overall height, length of arms, hands, feet and legs. We also look for different things like particular characteristics such as tattoos. Another example of that is a recent theft at west of Casino, where a person of interest was identified stealing a large quantity of fence panels. Conveniently enough for us, on his arm he had a large tattoo which was captured by the CCTV. Unfortunately for him, it assisted in his demise when it came to identification. We also look at chemical and heat treatments to restore identification numbers. Now, identification numbers are quite important in relation to proving ownership. Now, when items are stolen, obviously the criminal element have a complete disregard, and to try and hide the crime, they will take the serial numbers off items such as motor vehicles, motorcycles and firearms. So we're able to utilise specialist knowledge in the chemical and heat treatment by our forensic services to recover those numbers on those items. Unfortunately, it's not going to work all the time, but obviously if we can get as much as we can prove certain people, if they're in possession of that item, and we can prove that item was taken from a premises, it definitely helps with the investigation. Additionally, over the last considerable amount of time, a lot of the manufacturers are looking at utilising data coding and coding components which they're placing on, I suppose, their machinery. So, for example of that is motorbikes. Certain motorbikes have a data dot program which they utilise. This is extremely effective in, I suppose, identifying your items when they're stolen.
Good afternoon, Ty, and thank you very much for doing this. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry to interrupt you, Ty. My name is Anne and I'm a part of the Rural Crime Prevention team. And I've just got a couple of questions that are coming through, and I'm wondering, Ty, if you're okay, would you mind answering one of these questions? Because it's in regards to one of the topics that you're talking about, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine, Anne.
Okay, so this one's come from Beth, and thank you very much, Beth, for asking this. But the question has been, do the weather elements affect fingerprints and DNA?
Beth, they certainly do, and obviously one of the biggest things we'd like to do is we like to get there as soon as possible. You know, we like to preserve that area where there is a strong possibility of fingerprints or DNA. Again, it's the primary form of identification in relation to our suspects, and any little bit helps. So what we do try to encourage is the preservation of those areas, so we can try and get the best identification possible.
Thank you, Ty, and I'll let you continue with your presentation.
Thank you, Anne. Obviously, in the rural community, a number of other things that occurred are frauds, you know, and it's given the fact that we've been through drought, fires and the like, you know, one of the things that we look for is in those frauds is the document examination. So we can do a lot of that during that period too. And our specialist investigators are extremely good at identification. So what I'll move on to now is obviously how do you protect your evidence? So a crime scene might be the shed that equipment was stolen from, a paddock where a fence has been cut, or where crops have been destroyed, or where a vehicle has been rummaged through. So crime scenes might contain evidence including fingerprints, blood, which is your DNA, tyre impressions, shoe impressions, fibres, cigarette butts, tool marks or other physical evidence objects that have been left behind. Rural crime is obviously very hard to solve, as often out in those rural and remote areas, there's no witnesses and no CCTV. One of the major issues we often face is that hard-working farmers just want to get on with business, so they will clean up the mess that's left behind prior to the police attending the scene. The delayed attendance of police in some rural areas can also contribute to this. However, this is something we're working hard to address. What we'd like to see you do in a crime scene is preserve it as best you can. If you don't have to clean up the scene, we'd encourage you not to. We'd encourage you not to touch or move objects, open or close the doors, and continually walk in and out of the crime scene. We encourage you to try and leave the scene as untouched as possible until the police can arrive and make their decision on whether or not to have specialist investigators attend, or whether they will take photographs and gather the evidence themselves. If you've got to move an object prior to the police getting there, for example, if something was left in the middle of the road or in a paddock that the stock may trample over, photograph it if you can. If you've got the ability to wear gloves or something similar to avoid any transference of DNA. Try to minimise the handling of any object when you do. And when the police get there, show them the picture if you can on a digital camera. Tell the police where it came from. It's always best if you can leave the crime scene as it is. However, sometimes you may have to secure a scene while waiting for police to attend. If you do have to close doors and lock them up, try to touch a part of the door that wouldn't have been touched by the offender. For example, the very top of the door or the bottom of the door to avoid smudging any fingerprints or any transference of DNA. If you're in doubt about what to do with a crime scene while you're waiting for police to attend, whether you should lock up a shed or secure a firearm that might have been left there, make a second call to the police, describe the situation to them, and seek appropriate advice. If we don't know about the crime, we cannot respond and investigate the crime. Obviously, there's several ways that you can report the crime to the New South Wales Police. You can call your local police station. For non-urgent crime, you can call the police assistance line on 131 444. To provide information anonymously, you can call Crime Stoppers on 1800 333 000. You can even report non-emergencies online via the community portal. We want to encourage all of you to report all the crime that you come across. We understand you may not know when it happened, who did it, or how they did it. We may not be able to investigate that incident due to a lack of evidence at the time, but we may be aware of similar incidents which we can link it to. We may know of an offender in your area that commits that particular crime, that particular way. We need your help to help us put the pieces of the puzzle together to catch these offenders. Obviously, there's other ways in which we, I suppose, publicise our rural crime. We currently have a New South Wales Facebook page in relation to rural crime. It's titled the Rural Crime Prevention Team, New South Wales Police Force. It's I suppose, a proactive approach to show the community what we as rural crime investigators do within your communities throughout New South Wales. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you very much, Ty. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any more questions, please continue to put them into the questionnaire that you've got there. Just type them up. And if I can ask for Ty, Cameron and Damien to turn your cameras on, we will start with asking some of these questions. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Okay, first off the rank, I would like to direct this question to Cameron. So Julie has asked, with livestock, how much weight do brands and earmark evidence in court as compared to NLIS identification on same stock?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thank you for the question, Julie. It's as we know, the NLIS is designed to record the device and pick statuses of and track devices and corresponding with livestock movements, disease control, biosecurity, food safety, market access, etc. And then you've alluded to earmarks, which can be identified to particular properties, but also branding, etc. So to answer your question, we put a lot of weight on those specific identifiers, but we don't look at them in isolation. I could probably draw the parallel with, if I can, like a motor vehicle. A motor vehicle has registration plates on there to identify and track the registration of that vehicle. But if it's stolen, the police will use that to help track that vehicle. Not unlike an animal, there's other things that we rely on also. So a car might be a particular colour, certain markings on it, certain wheels, which make it unknown to that owner, specific things like stickers and different things. A beast is not unlike that at all. A lot of the farmers we come across, they know their stock. They know the stock by looking at them, and they can identify them at any given time because of the history of their association with the animals. To the point that we've solved matters where it's quite clear that some of the animals have been hand raised in large numbers will come straight to the owner. Because they're well known to the owner. There's different things that we rely on, but to answer your question, we rely on both together. They're hand in hand. NLIS is not designed for the law enforcement purposes, however, it does help us. I hope that it does help in answering the question, Anne.
Thank you very much, Cameron. Damien, I'm just wondering whether you might like to answer this question that's come through from Katie. And what she'd like to know is, what details should I keep regarding my machinery? So I'm assuming what she's asking there is, what should I be recording in regards to my machinery?
All right, well, thank you for the question. So I think it's important to understand why we're recording that information. From the police perspective, there's a couple of things with it. It's the most important thing is it gives us an opportunity to recover property stolen from you. So if you're a victim of a crime, one of our objectives obviously is to, in the case of theft, is to return your property to you. So to do that, recording identifiers is essential. So when it comes to, you say machinery, there's going to be a pretty good audit trail for something like a quad bike or a registered vehicle, say, tractors and trucks and so on. And they do get stolen. There's nothing on your property that's probably immune from theft. So we go from those larger items like that, where you're going to have engine numbers and chassis numbers and all of those identifiers available to you. But it's more as we move down the smaller plant equipment items such as, you know, go from your tractor right down through to your chainsaw, and, you know, everyone's the old cordless tools now are pretty invaluable to everybody. They're the things that are probably more important to focus on, and there's a few ways you can do it, but identifying your property through recording serial numbers and model numbers, keeping receipts for those sort of things, or at least scanning them into some sort of electronic form is a really good way of doing it. And there's a few suggestions that we sort of toss up around how you might go about that too. So I did mention in a previous webinar that there are apps that you can access quite easily if you go into an app store. And I know some people are probably saying, what's the app store right now? But for those that are into that, there's inventory apps, and you can just choose one of those that will help you to record all of those details in a very quick and very succinct manner. And that's helpful too for if you've got insurance claims and warranty issues and all. There's a whole raft of benefits from that. You can go right through to running around for half an hour with your video camera on your phone and just take a quick video of all the items in your shed and their serial numbers and model numbers and so on, or a spreadsheet, or do the same thing with a pencil and paper. However you do it is just a matter of what fits for you, but they're the sort of details. And on top of that, Ty spoke about data dots and those sort of other means of identifying your property. You know, a touch of spray paint or engraving your driver's license number or PIC number into items that you think might be vulnerable to theft is another really good and permanent way to identify your property.
Thank you very much, Damien. Thanks. I know that you're our local computer guru, so if anyone has any more questions about that app that he's talking about, please feel free to send those questions through. Now, Cameron, would you like to just expand a bit more on that question for me, please?
Yeah, thanks, Anne. Damien touches on a very, very important component of target hardening, I suppose, we refer to it as, and it's prevention. And prevention is the best way, and it's our namesake, the Rural Crime Prevention Team. So doing those little bits and pieces, it just makes you prepared if should you fall a victim, unfortunately, to a crime, you've got all that information there, and that can be readily disseminated. And Damien touched on photographs. I think anyone under a certain age has more or less got a smartphone attached to their hand 24/7, so that can be done quite easily. But it is never more important to take the next step in terms of if you were to fall victim of a crime, and Ty touched on it in terms of the crime scene, that the sooner we get an image or a picture of that crime scene, we can start acting on that investigation. So we encourage you to take a photograph from different angles, different close-up if you can get to the crime, whether it be a broken window or where someone, there might be some horse hooves that have walked cattle out, or the broken cut fences, etc. Take a photograph of it, and when you ring the police or report it online, upload those photographs. And you can also give those photographs to the attending police. Ask the police for their email address, and they may even give you a mobile number from time to time if you know your local police officer, and you can text that crime scene to them. And what that does is it gives us a heads up of what's taken place. And let's not forget, the police, to get to your property, have to drive there. And offenders, if it's happened quite recently, they have to drive away from this. So quite often, not often enough, we do come across the offenders whilst en route to these crimes. So, and then that gets onto the next thing, is if there's a significant delay for police to get to your property, in rural properties, and maybe just down the road, or it may be hundreds of kilometres away, but the stark reality is it does take us time, and sometimes it's overnight, depending on what's happening on our local patch, that takes up our time. So it's never more important to take an image of that and then forward it on, and in that way, the officer that takes the report can give you advice over the phone on how to secure that evidence. Some items that we put in, for fingerprinting, go into paper bags. Some things go into plastic bags, and that depends. And the reason we do that is because the biological material that may be or may not be on that item gets degraded when it's stored in different ways. So we can provide that advice, even if it's starting to rain, with wind, an image straight away, and then we can secure that scene. But don't get disheartened if the police aren't there within 5 or 10 minutes. You can play your part as CSI, capture that evidence, and then we can launch the investigation from there. So, we've got a rural crime prevention team. It's very much a team relationship with the victims when a crime's been committed. But tap into your local resources, whether it be a local police or especially a rural crime investigator, to prevent these crimes from happening and target harden your property. So we'd rather not have to attend to any crimes at all, and one day hopefully that may happen, but we need your help to get to that status.
Thanks, Cameron, very much. And I think you've answered, Mark had sent a question through as well, and he wanted to know that what if police don't get there in time and I have to use the item or to go use the location before the police get there? And Mark, please let me know if he hasn't, but I think you have already answered that question for Mark in your response there. Look, I've got one more question that's come through, and Ty, I'm going to direct this one to you. Now, this one's come from Dan, and Dan has asked the question, how do I actually know if it's evidence at the crime?
Well, I suppose it depends on the location where the item is. You'll know whether or not you've used that item before, or you'll know whether or not the area where the incident or the point of entry has taken place, whether or not it has occurred. Your knowledge is going to be best portrayed there. But if you are, I suppose, worried about it, if you can leave it and wait till the police get there, that's what I would do. I'd allow the police to examine it, have a look at it, and make an informed decision with the information you're going to provide them. If you're able to do that, and that'll provide the best opportunity to gather the best evidence at the time.
Thanks very much, Ty. Gentlemen, that is all our questions that have come through. And I'd just like to say to the audience, I just want to say on behalf of the RCPT that having a beard is not a strict part of our uniform, even though it looks like that may be the case when you're looking at all those images there. I know they're stunning, wonderful men, but I must let you know that not all the RCPT officers have beards. So it's not part of the standard uniform. But that ends our night. That ends our night here, and I would like to thank everyone for participating, thank everyone for sending through your questions, and I would like to hand this back to the New South Wales Farmers Association.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
And thank you, Ty, for your presentation and valuable suggestions for tackling rural crime. I'm sure everyone will have found some very useful ideas to take away and put into practice. And thank you also to Cameron, Damien, Anne, and as well as Dan, our tech guru, for making these webinars possible. Lastly, thank you to everyone for joining in. And remember, the last webinar will take place this Thursday, the 19th of November at 7 p.m. It'll be focusing on the topic of Operation Stock Check and animal movement. So please join us again. And do remember, if you're not already a member of New South Wales Farmers Association, you should be. Good night.
Thank you.